It is Wednesday evening. You know what that means? Another edition of the Bears Over Beers podcast. My name's Ryan Droste, here with my good friend Khari Thompson, here to sip on some brews, talk some Chicago Bears football, coming off of a big win over the Los Angeles Rams. Khari, how you doing tonight, man?
I'm
He's
doing
hunting for his
wonderfully.
beard.
I just realized I didn't have it on the table, so let me go ahead and retrieve this right now. Today I have Fiddlehead,
Ooh.
Second Fiddle, double IPA. As I may have mentioned, this is a theme for me: double IPAs and stouts. That's how I get down.
I love that. And we're getting fancy this week because you got a glass too. And I also got a glass to pour mine into. So
Hey,
we
look at
are
that.
in
We're ready.
alignment tonight, man.
Yes, we were ready. And actually, we fished these out of the cabinet, like this overhead cabinet that we don't usually use. And now we're obsessed with them. So it seemed a perfect time to bust one out. We got this one from this brewery down the street that closed, RIP Turtle Swamp. But these are nice.
Fancy looking mug. I like it. Very good. How's your week going? Pretty good?
Yeah, it's going pretty good. I mean, swamped as always. Over here digesting the Boston sports landscape, but had a chance to dig into a little bit of the All-22 for the Chicago Bears. And I think they may have been possibly, listening to a bit of what we were talking about last week.
Ah, interesting.
I don't know.
Teaser. There's a teaser for our discussion tonight. Love to hear it.
How about you, man? What you got?
Well, all right. I got a kind of a Midwest standard here, Chicagoland standard. 3 Floyds, Zombie Dust, classic pale ale.
Listen, I'm from Northwest Indiana, so I'm from Hobart, Indiana. So we went down to 3 Floyds a lot back when I still lived out there, and we were down there. We'd go down there back when they had the kitchen. I don't know if they pulled that back up because they shut it down during the pandemic, but yeah, they had the kitchen going back then, and my wife will never stop talking about these pork belly tacos we had one time we went down there.
Man, I haven't been there in so long. The last time I was there was definitely pre-pandemic. I think it was 2016 or 17, and I ate there in the brew with all like the retro toys on the walls and stuff.
Oh yeah,
super cool place. But yeah, dude, do you remember Zombie Dust used to be so hard to get? It would sell out immediately at the liquor stores, and now you can find it everywhere, just 12 packs sitting around. It's crazy because
it's all mainstream now. And I remember like they had like Dark Lord Day. That was like their like Russian Imperial Stout. I don't know if they still do that. I haven't been around a long time, but yeah, I remember like that one time we went there, we had these like kick ass tacos, and like Young Guns was playing in the background. It was just
nice.
like it was a very memorable trip.
Yeah, dude, that's awesome. Cheers, virtual cheers. There you go, man. Yeah, I love 3 Floyds. All their beers are great. I got to tell you this, because remember last week you were sipping on the what was it, 11.8% Imperial Stout or something like that.
Yeah.
I have in my refrigerator right now 14.8% beer, and I thought about bringing it out just for you tonight, and I was like, the problem is I'm a little bit tired. I'll just let you behind the curtain here a little bit. So I wasn't sure if I could handle it. I thought that if I drank that, I might be just passed out by the end of this podcast, and that would be entertaining for the listeners. But
yeah, what you got 2 kids, right?
3.
Oh, you got 3.
I got 3. So here's the deal. Well, first of all, before I get to that, let me just say our buddy Brian was going to be on the show tonight. He's one of our co-hosts. He wasn't able to do the show because he lives in North Carolina and they got hit real hard with the hurricane. So thoughts out to Brian. Hopefully everything will be all right for him and his family, and he'll be joining us soon. So I was actually not going to be on the show, but I'm subbing for Brian. And man, it's been a crazy week. So our youngest, we are training her, like potty training right now. And she's good except for the overnight. And it's been that kind of gray area of, do we let her try? Do we put on the diaper? I promise, guys, we're going to get to Bears football. But just to put you behind the scenes here a little bit, she comes into my wife and I's room last night, just before 5 a.m., definitely peed the bed. And I never got back to sleep. So it's been
Yep.
a long day.
Mhm.
So the 14.8% beer probably wouldn't have been a wise choice.
It
So
probably would have knocked you straight out. We had, I think up until it was probably like what 3 weeks ago, we had gone months without incident. And there's just this one time she's real stubborn. No, I don't gotta go to the bathroom. I don't have to go. And she wakes up in the middle of the night crying. I'm like, everything's fine. Like, you having a nightmare or something? And I'm
oh
like,
no.
oh, come on. But we got it down to a science at this point. We're just like, all right, get rid of all this crap. I'll throw it in. Take her to our room. She's sleeping in there. We're good to go. But you know what? Let's go ahead and talk about a little bit of Chicago Bears football. Thank you all very
Let's do
much
it.
for indulging in our life discussions. Look, everybody's got a piece of it, you know. Whether
Yeah.
you got kids or not, you know, there's always stuff that wears you down. We're happy to take this hour to enjoy a Bears victory last week.
Yes.
We're gonna go ahead and recap that. Knocked off the LA Rams, took down Matthew Stafford, former '1 overall pick, guy that we were talking about as a model for Caleb Williams, franchise savior. And I think, and I mean, again, the final score and all that is not going to look terribly important, or rather, it's not going to look terribly impressive, I should say. The quarterback numbers aren't going to look spectacular, but I think the Bears made some important strides offensively in this one. And look, I think with every week that passes, and again, I was watching some throws that Caleb Williams was making on the all 22. And there were moments where I was thinking to myself, like, like, did he get that ball out a little bit late? Did he see it late? And then I'm realizing, like, okay, no, let me slow it down. No, he's progressing through different reads. Like, actually, his first pass attempt, the one that he completed to Keenan Allen right off the bat, he was looking to Cole Kmet in the flat first and then zipped it
Mm.
to Allen late. And I was thinking to myself, like, that was probably a little bit later than you would want, but that was probably because that wasn't the first read. He was looking to Kmet in the flat and then quickly shifts his eyes to the number 2, dots one in there really quick on a stick route. And, when you really watch it and watch it over and watch it over, you start to realize, like, this kid is making some really, really important strides here.
Yeah, I mean, just he was super efficient in the game Sunday. I mean, he did everything you wanted him to do. No turnovers, was kind of the big thing. He had the touchdown pass, of course, to DJ, which was just an absolute dime, just perfect pocket collapsing on him, hung in there, threw it right at the back of the end zone. Beautiful throw. I mean, yeah, he missed some. I know there's a clip out there of Rome just burning by the defender, and he was open down the field, and Caleb didn't hit that shot, didn't throw it to him. But I mean, overall, yeah, you were seeing progress every single week. He had his first game in the pros, over 100 passer rating this week as well. But like I said, taking care of the ball, that was so important. And I mean, yeah, he outplayed Matthew Stafford. Maybe not in the yardage, but certainly in the QB rating and in the turnover game. So I think it was a job well done for our fourth game for our rookie on Sunday.
Absolutely. And to kind of put a bow on that, you mentioned the yardage and like, the passer rating was obviously, very good for him. It was like 106. But that's one thing that just really quickly I want to talk about, because we have this tendency when we talk about quarterback play and assessing whether or not somebody had a good game. Look, not everybody's going to be digging into the all 22. And sometimes even when you're looking at the all 22, not everybody knows like what they're looking at, right? It's just another way to look at it and be like, okay, maybe I noticed this. Maybe you didn't know all the coverages, or et cetera, et cetera. But we have this thing when we look at the stats where it's this idea that if you didn't throw for 300 yards, or you didn't throw for at least like 2 touchdowns, then we can't say you had a good game. And so it's like this idea that, like, what do you mean? You only had like 150 yards passing or whatever and 1 touchdown. That wasn't that impressive. It's like, if there's one thing that I've learned about watching quarterbacks play football, it's that you can absolutely have a very good game throwing for fewer than 200 yards
Yeah.
and throwing for like 1 touchdown. You can absolutely have had a good game under those circumstances. You don't always have to be Superman. You don't always have to throw for 400 yards, or you don't always have to make God tier throws. Like, I think that's the other thing, right? Is people are like, that throw, like, who cares about that throw? Like, that was easy. He was like wide open. It's like, because you want to see somebody feathering a ball down the field 20 yards between two defenders. Like, oh, yeah. Then now that guy's great. It's like
Yeah.
the easy stuff. You're supposed to make the easy stuff look easy.
Right.
Right. And I think Caleb Williams is getting to that point where he's starting to make the easier stuff look easier, in addition to being able to make the hard stuff happen. Like, obviously we're going to talk about, like, the touchdown throw that's an elite quarterback level throw. It is. Like, that's what separates the good from the great. But there's also a throw that he had to Cole Kmet over the middle of the field, which is another one where it's like, yeah, that's elite quarterback throw.
To get that
Right.
ball right over the linebacker, I think it was, just right
Yep.
over his hands, and then to drop it down perfectly right to Cole. I mean, just the angle on that throw was incredible. Yeah.
Yes. And so Caleb Williams is showing you that it's not all perfect. The accuracy does still need to be worked on, but it is getting better. And some of this is chemistry stuff. You just got to get the live reps with some of these guys. And I think it's starting to materialize.
Something just popped in my head as you were talking about that. I'm just going to randomly throw this question at you. Where does this obsession with stats come? Do you think that that's a video game thing? From like people growing up playing video games and being obsessed with how many yards, touchdowns they throw in the games? Because I feel like older football heads, it doesn't matter to them at all. Like they never talk about the stats in the way that people our age and younger do.
Well, it's interesting because, I mean, I think that is partly a video game thing and a fantasy football thing. As
Yeah.
fantasy football's become more popular. And then also, right, like you see the highlights and the tickers, right? And it's just like, oh yeah, this guy threw for 300 yards and like 3 or 4 touchdowns. It's like seeing like Tom Brady games over and over and over again. But again, like Tom Brady wasn't throwing for 300 yards every game either. Or like the Peyton Manning numbers, or like, stuff like that. Like this high volume, right? And then we get this in other sports too, where people are just like, somebody scored 20 points in basketball. Like, that's okay. But it's like, you can have a really good 20-point game. It doesn't all have to be 30, 40, 50, but we love the volume stats. Because that's a sign of like, yeah, this guy really went above and beyond. But I think it's interesting you brought that up, because back in the day, like in the early 2000s, when I was first starting to watch football, like 300-yard passing games were like, whoa, that guy, they let him throw that much.
Yeah.
It's like, what do you mean? Like, aren't you supposed to be giving the ball to your running back 25, 30 times? Why are you throwing the ball that much to have 300-yard passing games all over the place? And it was real. It took a while for it to get to that point. It used to be more like, you're throwing for 200 yards maybe, and your completion percentage is like 59%, but you're still good.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously the rules have changed and stuff to make passing more friendly in the league. But I mean, it just popped on my head because I remember being a kid. I'm a little bit older than you, so like early '90s, watching Sports Center before school every day. When I was in elementary school, and and then even in junior high, I don't remember being like obsessed with how many yards passing a quarterback had. Honestly, I think back then I looked at the running back numbers more, to be totally honest about it. But like, I mean,
that was really what the game was about back then. You were still drafting running backs in the top 5 regularly.
Yeah. But it is this weird obsession, because that's so many people just go to that right away. Oh, he didn't even have 200 yards passing. They won the game. He didn't turn the ball over. He had a touchdown pass. Like, why does that matter? Of course, we're Bears fans. We want a 4,000-yard passer eventually. Don't get me wrong. But I mean, in a game like we were having against the Rams, we got the run game working finally, Khari. So, I mean, you're not going to throw for 300 yards when you have DeAndre Swift having a game like he had. And you teased this at the top of the show where you watched the tape. And I assume this was about the running game, where you said maybe they were listening last week. So what did you notice?
Well, the very first thing I noticed is that, again, literally the first drive, especially, and this was kind of the bread and butter that they got back to. Obviously, it's not that they never did runs out of shotgun, but it was 12 and 13 personnel, single back, under center, give the ball to DeAndre Swift on the move, and let him hit the hole downhill. And if he's going to bounce it, let him bounce it on the move, not from a standstill. And that immediately struck me as like, okay, that right there, that's an adjustment. And there's a stat that I'm gonna try to find here. Actually, I found it right here. Jonathan Wood, you all probably know him around Bears Twitter, found this stat for DeAndre Swift. His time behind the line of scrimmage is 2.76 seconds, and yards per run, like yards gained, were all much lower yesterday than the whole season. So he was spending basically less time behind the line of scrimmage than he had at any point this year. And essentially, I think that speaks to what we're talking about. Because if you're a running back in a shotgun formation, I've been a running back in shotgun. You are standing still and you're trying to explode, kind of like, first of all, you're waiting for the snap to get there, and then you're riding the mesh point and then trying to create momentum and get moving forward, as opposed to you are 6-7 yards behind the line of scrimmage and you are moving downhill towards the line. Like you have picked up to like 70-80% speed by the time you get the football, and you're hitting a hole. And I feel like that played so much better to DeAndre Swift. And there's still some stuff that, like, the way that he runs and the way that I think he kind of, cuts back, where it feels like he's not sudden with the way that he cuts back and maneuvers running lanes all the time. But it was clearly an improvement. And that touchdown run was a thing of beauty. Like, hurled the guy, weaved through some holes, got downhill, and then once he hit the gas and got into open field, it was done. It was a wrap. That's the way we want DeAndre Swift running the football. And again, that wasn't like a 130-yard game. It was like 88 yards rushing or something like that, because they spread the wealth a little bit. Roshan Johnson got a touchdown, kind of as predicted, but Swift being able to break out that big touchdown run and establish himself earlier in the game with some good runs, that makes such a big difference for your offense. Because the thing you can't have happen with the Chicago Bears right now is for Caleb Williams to have to Superman this operation. It's just, you can't have that happen 4 or 5 games into his career. You want to be able to support him with a run game. And last Sunday felt like the first time this year that they really made that possible.
Yeah, 23 carries for the running backs. Swift had 16 of them, 5.8 average for 93 yards. Roshan got the ball 7 times, 26 yards, 3.7 average. He had that big third down run kind of towards the end of the game where he picked up the big first down. Both of them were very good. Herbert didn't even get a run. He did not get a single handoff in the game, even though they had said during the week he was going to be the goal line back. But Roshan got it, which I think a lot of us, when we saw that news, were kind of confused by that, because Roshan seemed like the dude who would be better on the goal line. But yeah, I mean, Roshan was great. Swift finally having that breakout game. You mentioned the blocking, especially on that touchdown run. Cole Kmet had a great block on that run. Pryor did as well. I think we talked about on the show last week. We wanted to see Pryor using his size in the run game, which, he wasn't as great in the pass blocking, which was to be expected, but he was pretty good in the run blocking. And even Coleman Shelton, who's had a rough go of it this year, he made a key block on that big Swift 36-yard touchdown run. So there's definitely some positives in both the run game. I think also in how we had Waldron calling the game. You mentioned it, he's kind of adjusting to what he has, it seems like, and kind of learning about the personnel the more we go here. And as we're going to talk about later in the show, we're kind of entering this section of the schedule where hopefully they keep adjusting and they get some things rolling here and build some momentum going into the back half. So we're going to talk about all of that. But before we do, we got to hit a break right here. And we got to talk about one of our new sponsors here on Second City Gridiron. So, Khari, you want to tell them about our sponsor?
I'm taking it away. It is the greatest time of the year. Again, I believe I saw something that we are going to have 55 straight days of football, just uninterrupted, all the way into November, which is, yes.
Oh, yeah.
Football's back, and it is here until February, at least the NFL version. So, over 1 million fans across 33 states got into the game last year by making picks on Underdog. Win up to 1,000 times your money just by choosing higher or lower on your favorite player stats like touchdowns, passing yards, and more. And listen, I've been getting really big into Underdog because I like, so many of the people that are sponsored by there, like Brett Coleman. I catch a lot of Brett Coleman stuff, and Bill Belichick also has a show with Underdog. And honestly, that Underdog commercial with the higher and lower stuff like that is probably the most personality he showed in 2 decades. And I started trying out the app myself, right? So we're on it. So listen, making picks on Underdog is straightforward. Signing up is even easier. I can tell you that. Just head over to Underdog's simple to use mobile app or underdogfantasy.com. Sign up with the promo code CITY, and Underdog will give you a free pick to use on your first cash pick'em entry, plus up to 1,000 in bonus cash when you deposit. That's Underdog Fantasy, promo code CITY, to claim your new customer special of a free pick and your deposit offer. You must be 18 years or older. Make sure you're 19 years or older in Alabama and Nebraska, 19 years older in Colorado, 21 and older in Massachusetts. That's where I'm at. And make sure you're present in the state where Underdog Fantasy operates. Terms apply. Okay. Boom.
Nice. Love
Back
it.
into it.
Check out Underdog, you guys. All right. So, any other thoughts on week 4 before we transition into this week? Anything else you noticed, Khari, watching the All 22?
Dvon Dexter.
Mm-hmm.
It's funny because I think he's still slower off the ball than I think people would like to see, but he's just so overwhelming when you try to single block him. One thing I noticed actually was after that sack that he had on Matthew Stafford, they immediately ran a play off of where Dvon Dexter was coming through, and it worked out because he literally beat his guy so bad that the run went to the other side of him.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just we're now getting to that point where Dvon Dexter is slowly becoming such a problem that people are like, well, our guard might get his ass whooped. So maybe while he's getting his ass whooped, we should run a play off of that. That really kind of struck me.
I've seen a lot of the social media chatter this week. I'm sure you've seen it too. I mean, I got to admit, when the Bears passed on Jalen Carter to pick Darnell Wright, I was not happy about it. I wanted Carter. And, there's been a lot of, oh, look, Wright's taken this step back this year. Carter, he's been good since he was drafted, but this year, he hasn't been that great this year. And people have been started to quote tweet, put the screenshots in of the stats between Carter and Dexter, taken in the same draft, 1 round apart, Dexter at the end of the second round, and, saying, oh, maybe this is the conversation that we need to be having. Is Dexter now kind of starting to outperform that blue chipper over in Philadelphia? Thoughts on that?
I think when it comes down to it, Jalen Carter is clearly more talented. He's more explosive. He's all of that. And so I'm still, I think, gonna take Jalen Carter. If you're just asking me to pick between, I'm taking Jalen Carter over Dvon Dexter. But I think that for what the Bears needed, for what the Bears had to do in that draft, I think they did the right thing in trying to get the protection for the quarterback sewed up. And then a guy that had plenty of physical tools. It's not that's the thing. Dvon Dexter's second round pick. It's not like he's some scrub. right? He actually fits in sort of that DeForest Buckner role that Matt Eberflus had when he was in Indianapolis.
Mhm.
Obviously not quite as like sudden and dominant as Buckner was. I'm not going to compare them in that way. Like I'm not doing that, but just huge, right? Huge and long. And when he gets his hands on you, he can absolutely he just toss you completely out of the way. He can overwhelm you with kind of that raw physical ability. And as he starts to get better with his hand placement and get better with the suddenness, you're going to see him continue to progress. And I feel like it's not like it was last year. I mean, it's clearly not the way it was last year. Like, for example, I'm looking at some PFF grades right now. So Dvon Dexter last year, his overall grade was a 50.9, and he was a horrible run defender. He could rush the passer a little bit, but he really was a liability on early downs. This year, I mean, he's still average to below average when it comes to run defense, but his overall grade, he's gone from a 50.9 to a 65.3. So in just a 4-game sample size in year 2, he has clearly taken a
Yeah.
step up
It's like a
from
30%
where
increase.
he was as a
Yeah.
solid all-around dependable player on early downs. Still got to work on the run defense. I think there were points where, I mean, for a guy that big, you don't want to see him getting moved as much as he was. And I feel like that was an issue at points in this game. Not that it really burned the Bears that much, because I mean, the Bears defense is a bunch of hellions, and you've got, Jaquan Brisker over there destroying everything that moves, and Kyler Gordon is all over the place and all that stuff. But I think that we're starting to see a little bit of some of the fruits of that labor when it comes to Dvon Dexter and developing him into a player. He's turning into a serviceable guy at the 3.
Yeah. I mean, the whole team needs to work on the run defense. Ain't just him, man. I'm telling you. Last week with Williams averaging 4.9 yards per carry in that game, Rivers had 4.3 yards per carry against the Bears. They're going to be going up against a Panthers rushing attack where Hubbard averaged 5.8 against the Bengals last week. I mean, he had 104 yards rushing. The Bears are going to have to contain that. I know everyone thinks Carolina is going to be some kind of easy win, or it seems like that's the narrative. It is not. I mean, they ran the ball really well. I know the Bengals have their own problems right now, but we definitely, it's not
Bengals are
just Dex.
horrible
Yeah,
defense. My God.
yeah. But we are going to have to, we're going to have to get the run defense figured out down the stretch for sure. So it's not just Dexter, but I mean, you mentioned Brisker. My God, in that game against the Rams, this dude did everything. I mean, the 12 tackles, he had a sack, he had 2 tackles for a loss, he had an interception, he was playing all over the field, he took 18 snaps in the box, he took 27 as the deep safety, 14 snaps in the slot. I mean, this guy did everything. He did it all. He was incredible in the win over the Rams. He's having just a great year, and he had a 80.2 grade from PFF, I believe,
I believe
against
it.
the run. So I
Yeah.
mean, he played the run pretty well last week.
Yeah. I mean, it's actually one thing that I noticed on film that I was a little bit disappointed with is like Andrew Billings getting, yeah, he's getting double teamed, but him getting kind of turned out of the hole a little bit. I think, yeah, just right in the interior of that defense. I think they need a little bit more. It helps when you have in kind of like your strong safety in Jaquan Brisker. I know they're kind of like doing things kind of interchangeably, but that's really Jaquan Brisker's bag is like I think getting in there and just busting things up, closer to the ball, and then Kyler Gordon, who can also just get in there and shoot the gap for a tackle for loss. When you've got those kinds of pieces, it helps take some of the pressure off of I like your front 4 have to dominate on every single play, but you still don't want to live in that world where you're asking your safeties or your extra defensive back to clean up when a guy is getting 3 and 4 yards down the field already and they're not getting touched until that point. Um So I'm looking forward to some better play up front from the Bears, because if there's one thing that's been sort of lacking throughout this, I would say it's that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no disagreement here. So should we transition to talking about the Carolina Panthers?
Let's
Should
talk
we do
about the
this?
Carolina Panthers.
I think we got to start by talking about the legend of Andy Dalton, the esteemed former Chicago Bears
Andy.
quarterback. Since, since making the switch, and taking out Bryce and putting in Dalton, the Panthers they're 1-1. Okay, so they lost to the Bengals, who, as you mentioned, are not a good football team this year. But they had not really a shootout, but they scored 24 points, 34-24 last week, Bengals and Panthers. And they defeated the Raiders the week before, scored 36-22. Andy Dalton so far in his 2 starts has a average between the two, a quarterback passer rating of 101.4, 5 touchdown passes, 1 interception, 65% completion percentage for 539 yards. So, I mean, certainly the team they've looked a lot better since he's come in. So, I mean, how are you feeling about Andy Dalton versus Bryce Young and what you've seen so far?
Well, the first thing you say right off the bat is, what the problem in Carolina was offensively. It was clearly Bryce Young. And I don't get any pleasure out of saying that, because I want to see all these young quarterbacks succeed. But I mean, they really threw that dude to the dogs last year. And it just with just an absolutely putrid roster, no receivers and not much help to speak of. And clearly the marks of that are still on him. Now you go ahead and you bring in, Dave Canellis as your head coach. And I think it shows that when you have, a decent like you have a serviceable quarterback, he can make that work. I think that's really what that is, because we know Andy Dalton at this stage in his career is no elite quarterback, but he has been around the league for a long time. He knows what he's looking at. He knows how to run an offense. He knows how to take the easy stuff and just keep it pushing. Just run an offense. And that was really apparently all the Carolina Panthers needed. So, I mean, I think they clearly still don't have elite weapons offensively. I mean, obviously they've got like, Deontay Johnson, though they're talking about potentially trading him at some point, or that he's not really in the long-term plans for this team. You've got, Xavier Legette, who, got his first touchdown. Good for him.
Mm-hmm.
But this is not some world-beating team, but their offensive line is better. And that's one thing that you can see, is that when you see somebody performing as badly as Bryce Young was, you think like, oh yeah, he's not being protected. And it's like, oh, the Carolina Panthers offensive line's actually not that bad. And Andy Dalton has more or less kind of proven that it's
Yeah.
good enough. So I don't think this is going to be as simple as it seems. I think the other part of this is that Andy Dalton knows this team, or maybe not quite as strongly as perhaps it was when he was last year, because he left before, Matt Eberflus came here and everything. But he's going to know some of what they're doing, and he's going to
Mm-hmm.
know some of the personnel and all of that. I think it's not going to be the easiest out in the world. It's not going to be like it was last year when
No.
Bryce Young pulled up in here and was just completely hapless.
Yeah.
So I think the offense is going to have to score in this one. Bottom line.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, they've been putting up points, like we said. I mean, their offense has certainly taken off since Dalton's been in there. Especially, you mentioned Deontay Johnson. He looked really good in that. I did have a chance to watch the condensed, the 35-minute just play version
Yep.
of the Bengals Panthers game last week. And he's on their injury report. I don't know if you had a chance to see the injury report. They had like 13 people on their injury report. I think 3 of them they were just resting, but the rest were legit, did not practice or limited. And Johnson did not practice. He did not practice today. I would imagine he's probably going to play, and they're just being careful with him. I mean, but in the last 2 weeks since Andy Dalton took over, he's got 205 yards receiving. Deontay Johnson does 2 touchdown passes. I mean, he's been the go-to guy and has looked really, really good. So luckily for us, we got a hell of a secondary out there who's they're going to make it pretty tough on him. And I mean, I'm pretty confident in defending against Andy Dalton. And
You should be. I mean,
yeah,
Andy Dalton is not the kind of quarterback that scares you,
no,
right? Like you're not afraid of Andy Dalton in the same way that like you're not you wouldn't be afraid of a guy like Joe Flacco, right?
hmm
But that doesn't mean that guy can't beat you, right?
right,
Because again, it's like they just sort of this is one thing that I found in kind of watching like Brian Hoyer at training camp, or Patriots training camp a couple of years ago. Like Brian Hoyer, this was kind of like at the point where you're really not trying to play him, but in practice, especially in training camp, this is a guy who just knows where everything is supposed to be, knows where all the shot plays are, knows where all the weaknesses are,
hmm
and and sometimes just like, oh yeah, I'm going to take this shot and I'm going to hit it because I can, and I'm going to do it before you know I'm going to do it, and because I can just hit that because I've seen so much football,
yeah,
right? And so a guy like Andy Dalton or like Joe Flacco or any of these like kind of older, used to be starters, but now backups, they shouldn't scare you, but that doesn't mean that they're not a threat.
yeah,
If you know what that means.
absolutely. No, and I mean, also with the confidence is just, what we saw the Bears secondary do to Matthew Stafford last week. We're talking about a future Hall of Famer
Yes.
holding him to
Exactly.
a 77 passer rating. That was Stafford's worst passer rating game since I think right around mid-season last year. I mean, it's been a little while since he's had a game that bad as far as passer rating goes. Did not see the end zone, just through the one pick. So to Brisker. So yeah, I mean, I'm pretty confident, despite the fact that obviously Dalton is seeing the field well. And I know if you look at the Bears, we were talking about their rushing defense, and if you look at them statistically and like yards allowed to rushing, it doesn't look too bad. And a lot of that is brought down because there wasn't a lot of rushing yards in the Texans game. But the other 3 games, I mean, we've given up 100-yard rusher right close to that. The average has been pretty high. There's different times in games where it's looked like these guys could just run right through our defense. And that's definitely been the weakness of an otherwise top 5 unit, I think. So I think if they control the run against Carolina, they're for sure going to win. I mean, that's the only thing that would give me some pause, just based off of
Yeah.
watching last week's game, because like I said, Hubbard looked really good running the ball and went over
Well, I mean,
100 yards.
yeah, and I think being around like Bill Belichick as much as I've kind of been around him, and again these ideals failed him later in his time with the Patriots because he didn't do a good enough job of surrounding the team with talent, and I think he was a bit too rigid in some aspects. But look, when you play complementary football and you're not one dimensional, and you can run the ball, you can pass off of it, you play smart situationally, make the important plays when they need to be made. You don't have to be world beaters to win a game in the NFL. Now, obviously, having talent increases your margin for error. That's why a team like the Kansas City Chiefs, who's clearly like not playing their best football at all, can still be 4-0, because even if Patrick Mahomes isn't playing like God or like the second coming of Christ in football cleats, it's like he can still do enough things in order to win a game,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
Now, when you're not an elite team, that margin for error decreases. So that's obviously why you don't see teams like, the Cincinnati Bengals right now, who are just struggling all over the place, or like the New York Giants or the Carolina Panthers, right? You don't see them winning all these games, but on any given Sunday, if you are just playing smart football, you're controlling the line of scrimmage, you're doing all those basic old school things that we tend to like not want to talk about right now because it's 2024. Football's different now. You can still win a game doing those things.
I mean, this season has been really weird though, because I mean, passing yardage is down so much across the league,
Oh
and
yeah,
it's like
so
it's
much.
it's it's felt like an old school year. So I mean, right on brand. It's been a very very strange year. But as far as this game goes, are you confident in picking the Bears?
Yeah, I mean, I think um again, why should we be afraid of Andy Dalton, right? I think it's knowing that the way that he's been playing and the comfort that he's had, he can beat you. Um, but I think that again, you focus on stopping the run, you do a good job at that, and you limit any explosive plays, then you're just going to make it hard on him, make it difficult, and then you get down to inside the 20s and you throttle him and you hold him to field goals.
Hmm.
Right? That old bend, don't break. And then on offense, you got to do the exact same thing. You need to run the football. You need to continue building on what you just built on against the Rams and play complementary football that doesn't put it all on Caleb Williams' back. Because again, could you win a game where Caleb Williams is throwing the ball 40 times? Sure. I think against the Carolina Panthers, you could probably do that. But do you really want to try that? I don't think you want to try that. I think you would love it if you're getting, you know, 25, 30 carries out of your whole stable of running backs and getting, a 4.5 yard clip or, somewhere in that range. And then Caleb only needs to put up like 180 passing yards with a touchdown or two, and you get out of there with a relatively easy win.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think they got to run the ball again. If you look at Carolina's defensive rankings, they are 29th in the league against the run. So we have to get that run game going. They are giving up on average 148 yards rushing per game. And with the Bears doing what we saw them do last week, get Swift going again, get Roshan in those, tough yardage situations on the goal line again, they're going to have a lot of success. It's going to open up the passing game. They're right around in the middle of the league against the pass. So definitely Caleb can have some success, but there's no reason that this Bears team shouldn't be able to run the ball, get some more confidence running the ball, after having success in this matchup, hopefully get the offensive line a little bit more confidence too as we keep going. That pass blocking is still a huge concern. Also, the injuries. Tevin Jenkins has that ribs injury. We saw Pryor move over to the left guard spot. We saw Nate Davis come in. I imagine that's the lineup they're going with this weekend again. So, I mean, Tevin did not practice today, so nursing the ribs still. Thoughts on the offensive line right now?
I mean, it's been a sore spot all year, and in I think run blocking and pass protection. So I don't feel good about it at all. Like
Hmm.
if we're gonna keep it 100, I don't feel good about the offensive line right now at all. Um, I will say that obviously last year or last week, as I mentioned, they did a better job, but I also think there were certain points where they still weren't they were still leaving yards on the field. There were
Yeah.
still plays where on an outside zone, you feel like if Darnell Wright or one of the tight ends gets that linebacker, they can peel off that double team, get to the second level. That's a 20-yard gain.
Hmm.
And it wasn't happening. I mean, it was still like a fine gain. It was still like 5 yards or whatever. But there are bigger plays in the run game that are being left on the field. And I just Tevin Jenkins, unfortunately, I don't know if he's just hurt, if that's what it is, but he has not been himself. He clearly has not been as good as we've come to expect. Um, we know the issues that we have, the limitations we have at center. We
Hmm.
know the limitations that are at right guard with Nate Davis and Matt Pryor. I think Darnell Wright, I mean, he's battling, but I think he's still learning. Braxton Jones, I've seen some people kind of talk about this, and I've watched a little bit of some of these side by sides as well. I wonder if he's also not quite the same player as he was before getting hurt last year, or maybe he's just getting his legs under him. Maybe he needs some time to click, but really just it's not a great unit.
To say the least, with very little depth. Although Bates is hopefully coming back.
Hopefully,
The intended
Ryan Bates.
center.
Yeah, let's get Ryan Bates back at center. That's gonna make a huge
game changer. But yeah, I mean, like you said, none of us thought the Bears had a great offensive line, but we thought serviceable. And it's just the regression across the board, whether it's technique or just because injuries, Darnell Wright with the back injury that he's been nursing too. But yeah, you're right. Braxton hasn't looked quite the same. I mean, the best we can do is cross our fingers and hope this thing gels down the stretch, because I mean, you are one more injury away from this thing getting catastrophic. It is not freaking good, Khari.
Well, I'll at least say this: you're not the New England Patriots.
Well, that's true.
Right? Where you just lost one of your only even decent offensive linemen, and even he wasn't having that great of a year in terms of like grades and such. But missing David Andrews is just catastrophic. And then they're down to like their fourth left tackle, and they're talking about the first round guard that they drafted 2 years ago, trying to move him to center. When he comes back to action, he's not even healthy. Like, it's just a complete and utter disaster with the offensive line. It's so bad. I don't even know when we're going to see Drake May. Are we even going to get Drake May for the supposed Williams May duel? I don't know. I don't know if we're going to get that. I'll be so sad. But the Bears aren't even quite that bad off yet, but it's still not that much better.
Sacrifice Drake May for
the return of Ryan Bates.
Yeah, sacrifice Drake May for the public beheading by Dvon Dexter. That could be what's in store. Yeah, I don't know. I probably wouldn't put him in given the situation there, but yeah, who knows?
I mean, I guess like that's the thing though, right? Is from here, and again, the Bears don't have this problem because this is the Caleb Williams show all the way through. The Patriots have by far, just like by so much, the worst passing offense in football. And even when the protection is there decently, the ball's just not getting downfield. And you're just thinking to yourself, like, okay, at some point, do we really want to keep trotting this out with Jacoby Brissett and it going nowhere? Or are we going to finally put Drake May in and see if he can at least give us something? At some point, I think it's like it becomes hard for the team to get behind. And the receivers over there are as pissy right now as DJ Moore looks all the time. It's
that's a whole nother topic. What is going on?
Whole other topic. But look, you know what? Let's keep it positive though. Let's keep it positive because listen, are we about to have a little mini win streak here? Is it time to go streaking?
Is it time to go streaking, Khari? Now, before I scare off the listeners, no, I'm not going to take off my shirt and run out of here. Maybe for like a $200 super chat, I would. But look,
no,
not that kind of streaking. But the Bears, I mean, we talked about this last week. This is the time, and we hope so much they could turn it around for the Rams, because 2-2 is so much different than 1-3. You get back to 2-2, we get these 5 games in front of us where we can really put something together. I mean, yeah, Carolina, God, I mean, they should win this game. Then you got Jacksonville over in England. Jacksonville looks terrible. You're talking about a team that's 4-2 going into the bye week. And then they got, the Commanders game is going to be tough. It's going to have a ton of media hype. We're going to
that is going to be a fun one.
2 weeks to prepare for that, though. We're going to have 2 weeks to prepare for that game. So that's to our advantage.
It's funny, though, because as you say that, I'm over here thinking to myself, like, Matt Eberflus having 2 weeks to prepare for a game. Has that ever actually worked?
True.
I don't know that it's Matt Nagy bad, but I feel like I don't even know if I trust that. But Yeah, I mean, I think we talked about this when we were looking at the schedule.
Yep.
And then you get the Cardinals as well and the Patriots. Like, there's an opportunity here. Obviously, you're probably not going to win all these games because that's just, randomness happens,
Mm-hmm.
right? But this is a 5-game stretch that all of these games are winnable,
Yep.
every last one. And so you have to stack up as much as you can before you get to the Packers. And I'm not saying this because I think like, oh yeah, the Bears are definitely going to lose to the Packers. But let's be honest, it's not like the Bears have had any luck against the Packers in recent years. So what do you want me to say?
I'm not picking them
Um,
until they finally beat them. I know I'm not. I've been burned one too many
exactly.
times.
And then you've got the Vikings, which are one of those teams right now you don't really want a piece of. Like they're really good right now. And Caleb Williams against Brian Flores creeps me out.
Mm-hmm.
I don't I will see. We'll see. Then you got the Lions and the 49ers and the Vikings again and the Lions again and the Seahawks. I mean, the back half of this schedule is rough. It's going to be
Mm-hmm.
rough as hell if these teams keep on playing the way that they are. So, if you can get yourself 6 or 7 wins before you get to the Packers and you got to deal with that whole thing, you're feeling good about yourself and you'll get something on that back half most likely. But getting potentially to 6 wins, maybe even 7 if you really want to get frisky, that's the difference between ending this year with say a 7-10 or 8-9 record or getting into the back half of the playoffs.
Yeah. No, you said, I mean, you look at these 5 games: Panthers, Jags, Commanders, Cardinals, Patriots. I think if this dream of making the wild card, especially how our division's shaping up right now, if that's something that we want to do, I feel like you almost have to go 4-1 here. And I don't think that that's out of the
Yeah,
question, honestly,
yeah.
because Carolina, Jacksonville, those should be wins. Patriots, that should be a win. And then you got to basically split Commanders and Cardinals there. So, I mean, it's certainly doable. And then you're 6-3 going up against Green Bay. And that's going to be a huge game. But look, if we got some momentum, we got some mojo going, getting into that game. Who knows? I said I'm not going to pick them, but I mean, it puts us in a pretty good spot at that point in time. I mean, Arizona, they got some talent on offense, to be sure. They've had some close games. They barely lost to the Bills. They blew out the Rams. Barely lost to Detroit. Got blown out by Washington. But I mean, that's a game I think is going to be fairly tough. So yeah, I mean, looking at that, I think if you got to split those 2 tougher games, and it's at Arizona as well. I'm sure there'll be a ton of Bears fans there, though. Patriots at home, Commanders is on the road. We got to go 4-1 here, man. I think we do. And then if you're 6-3, then if you can go 4-4 down the stretch, that's 10-7, and that's where a lot of us had them.
Yes.
And in the predictions, that was my prediction, 10-7. So,
Yep. I think I had them at 9-8, 10-7. I was kind of like waffled back and forth between, but I mean the way they played early in the year, you're not sure that we're going to see that kind of thing. But I think that if you continue to see progression out of the offense, like what we've seen, particularly in last weekend, I think you still have a shot. And this is the stretch. Look, if you're a good team, all these games are winnable. You should win at least 4. If you're not a good team, then you go 3-2 or
mhm,
worse. And then none of this matters anyway.
yeah. No, I mean, I figured going in when I looked at the schedule, they'd split with Minnesota, they'd split with Detroit. I had them losing both times to Green Bay. I mean, even splitting with Detroit and Minnesota looks pretty tough right now. I'm not gonna lie. So we gotta go streaking, Khari. We have to go streaking right now. We have got to rack up some wins to build us some padding into our record. And look, as far as the 2 losses we have, we're in a good spot because those are both non-conference losses. So we're just hitting the NFC portion of the schedule. So it's lined up well for the Bears despite everything that they went through the first couple of weeks and looking really bad at times. They're starting to gel at least a little bit. They got DeAndre Swift going. Caleb's improved every single game. The defense has been mostly lights out. I'm interested to see what happens these next 6 weeks here with the 5 games.
As am I. We are going to find out if this team is actually what we thought it was. Are they who we thought they were?
They are who we thought they were, and they made the wild card, Khari, and we're going to be doing more shows at the end of the year because we're going to have more games. I hope. That's what I hope.
As I want to slap the computer, but I don't want to slap my beer onto the computer, so I got to be careful.
Let them off the hook. You just see your webcam just fly up in the air. Nice.
Yep. And then I got to get the whole thing replaced because I spilled beer all over it. That whole thing. You got anything else? Any burning thoughts before we jump off here? Anything about the Bears? Anything about the league?
That's really all I had right now. I think that's all I had on my agenda, at least. No listener questions, I don't think, here in the chat, unless anyone has any for us at the last minute. Otherwise, we're about an hour in, so we're going to be hitting the road and probably enjoying a second beer off air. I always do on these nights. I think when you do a podcast that's about beer and football, you drink the one during the podcast, and you got to have a post-show beer, don't you?
I guess.
Unless you're drinking an 11.8%.
Like that. All right.
I mean, I am sometimes. I'm in a good mood. You get me in a good mood, Khari. I do these shows with you, and I'm like, I got to keep going.
Listen, I aim to create a positive environment. I love to make people happy, so I'm glad I do that for you. I unfortunately do not have another beer. I do have an apple cider, a hard cider that they grabbed from like this farm the other week while I was over stuck in working. I see that Connor Gillen has a question. Hit us, Connor. Let's go.
I was waiting to see if it's a legit question or if he's just gonna spam us or something.
Yeah, I know, right? Yeah. Please don't let us down. Do you all listen to Hamp and OB? I do not listen to them as much anymore. So I'm not up to date on what they may have been saying. So hey, if you got the lowdown on that, I know who you're talking about.
Yeah.
But I haven't been plugged into them in a minute, man.
I used to listen to them a lot. Yeah. Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. I was like, my Sundays, man, are just, because I'm writing this newsletter, right? Getting ready to, it's usually some of it is a good portion of it is football related, but like I'm just so tunnel visioned on it, like starting at noon. I don't listen to like anything else. Like I'm over trying to get away from my kid so she doesn't like, hop on my computer and, write a bunch of gibberish. So it's like, yeah, I find that I just don't listen to like much in terms of pre and post game shows anymore, man. Here's another one. Let's field this one before we hop off.
All right.
Do the Jags make a comeback, or are they cleaning house after this year? I know it's a Bears podcast, but I didn't see them failing so hard. I feel like this is such an interesting question that, I mean, I think it still has to do with the Bears this year, last year, etc. Right? Because you just paid Trevor Lawrence. It was like $53 million a year now, right? He's now up there with the highest paid quarterbacks in the league, and he just doesn't look good, bro. And I know it's not all him. I know it's not all him, but it's bad. We got to start having the conversation about Trevor Lawrence, man.
$275 million contract with 200 guaranteed.
It's bad.
Jeez.
And I think and the things you hear out of Jacksonville are that him and Doug Peterson aren't meshing right now. They're not getting along. And I gotta be honest, as much as I think we're like, oh yeah, Doug Peterson is perfect, right? There's a great idea. It's like more stable, it's more blah, it's not Urban Meyer chaos going on. It felt more stable, more steady, a guy who would, developed good quarterbacks. And that first year was like, it didn't feel elite, but it felt very good for Trevor Lawrence. And you're like, okay, yeah, here we go. Third year breakout incoming. And I just feel like it didn't happen.
Yeah.
I just don't think it happened for him. And this year he's regressed. And like, it's funny because like Brian Thomas is awesome, right? And you
Yep.
would think that like finally having like that guy, kind of helps take you to another level. And maybe it's just got to keep on gelling, but it just looks dysfunctional out there. I think that if this year continues on the way that it is for Jacksonville, then Doug Peterson got to go. I think you've had 3 years to get Trevor Lawrence to where you wanted him to be, and you missed your shot on the rookie contract entirely.
Mm-hmm.
And now it gets harder to build that team, and you don't know if Trevor is even that kind of guy at this point that can take you where you want to go, and you're paying him all that money. It's rough. Jacksonville is in a bad place, and part of why like you bring that up is, I mean, there's obviously how did Justin Fields end up being at this particular point in time the guy playing the best out of that 2021 draft class? We did not see that coming. Again, 4-game sample size. But I think the other thing that matters here from a Bears perspective is if Caleb Williams is what you think he is, what we think he is, he's going to make $60 million a year soon. He's going to be the highest paid quarterback in the league. And or at least like one of the top 2 or 3 when he signs his contract extension. It's like, man, I really hope he's that guy by then. By the time it's time to make that payday, and it's not just because he was number 1 overall and he's done good, he's won a playoff game, he's done well enough. Like, I hope that there are multiple playoff wins by the time it is time to make that decision, so that we know like that's the guy. He's him. He's a top 5 quarterback in the league by the time we got to pay him $60 million a year, because I do not want to be the freaking Jaguars.
Oh God.
3 years from now, 4 years from now. It's terrifying.
I mean, especially when you're talking about Peterson, with the different coaches that are going to be available for hire, especially on the offensive side, come this offseason. I mean, I think you probably have to move on. 3 seasons, that much invested in your quarterback. At that point, you got to see if somebody else can do something for you. I'll tell you who you should ask this question, Eli, is Taylor Dowell here on the second.
Oh, yeah.
She also covers the Jaguars as part of her day job, so she can give you a detailed answer on the Jags if you're looking for that. So
we're gonna have to pose her this question. We're gonna have to get her on one of these.
Yeah, that would be fun. So yeah, she's also here on Second City Gridiron. If you're not already subscribed, you guys subscribe to the channel. We got shows going up pretty much every single day. A great crew of Bears podcasters, analysts. We appreciate you all tuning in as well. And if you are tuned in right now, please hit the like button. That would help us out a lot in the YouTube algorithm, to get this thing trending on YouTube, so we reach some new listeners and viewers. And if you're listening on the podcast feed, we really appreciate you as well. Leave Second City Gridiron a 5-star rating wherever you're listening to your podcasts. Subscribe to the channel, of course, as well. It would help us out a lot. So, Khari, my beer's getting low. I'm about out of things to talk about, and I need to pour another one, my man. So I think we're going to take it home.
All right, get to it. I'm old manning this beer. I still got about a half left, but yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and finish it off. Cam, you have a great night. Have a good one with your fam, and we'll do this again.
I will. I'll save that 14.8% beer for the next time I'm on with you. I will especially save that one for you. You're
gonna have to remind me so that I can try to get with you on that.
All right. Yeah, I'll send you a DM. I'll let you know that this is the high ABV show that we're doing here in a few weeks. So
yes,
keep it locked here on your Wednesday night. Everybody, thanks for tuning in. Enjoy the Bears and the rest of football this weekend. Hopefully, we get another big W, and we'll be talking about it on the show next Wednesday night. Talk to you then, everybody. Take care.